Hi, I'm Mitchell.
And I'm John.
And this is
Board Game Battles.
Our debate this week is
Best Eric Lang game.
my champion is
Ankh.
And mine is Rising Sun.
not to be confused with Red Rising. That's a different game, different video. Get it off. I'm first, as per usual. So, Ankh is a 2020 release from CMON, of course designed by Eric Lang. It is the third and final installment in his Mythic trilogy after Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and now Ankh. In it, 2 to 5 players take on the role of different ancient Egyptian gods in their quest to be the single monotheistic god in a society where polytheism is on the decline. My first pro are the awesome components in this game. Just look at those minis, or biggies I guess we should call them. Even in the retail version, the components are still fantastic.
Yeah, well, you might have some big minis, but we have more of them. A lot more variety on the Rising Sun side.
I think you're right about that. I think that's actually more of a con, but I'll touch on that later. Okay, so I'm going to go into my second pro, which is the fact that this game has both symmetry and asymmetry. In a game this sprawling, it's incredibly impressive that there's no randomness. Although there are cards, the decks are symmetric, meaning that everyone has an equal chance at victory, and newer players can catch on easily. And these cards have some wild effects that can truly swing the tide of battle, meaning that having the superior force doesn't guarantee you anything. And even if you lose a brawl, you might end up getting more points than the victor due to some card effect or other condition. The only asymmetry in the game is the fact that each god has their own power, and at first, you might think your god's ability seems OP. Once you play the game, you realize that all of the gods seem to have OP abilities, but if all powers are OP, then I guess they're all equally P. But it still feels awesome to enact each and every one of them.
You know what? I don't have too much complaints about the combat, considering that it's in a lot of ways similar to Rising Sun. But I will say that similar to the mini field, we have a bit more variety, I would say.
Alright, I guess you're gonna, like in our last video, continually allude to things you'll say later instead of actually say them now. Seems kind of like a cop-out, but I will allow it. My third pro are the gods. A major difference from previous games in the trilogy is that players control a central figure, their god. This unit can't be killed even if the player loses a battle with the god involved. Probably the coolest mechanic, however, which we like to call the urge to merge, is the fact that at a predetermined point in the game, the 2 lowest scoring players begin to share control over a merged god with extra abilities.
You know, in our previous debate, we had a similar issue where the factions, although fun and different in some ways, in this case the gods that you play as, yes, are different, but sometimes they're too different. I mean, there's some abilities I think that are utterly useless compared to really powerful abilities on some of the gods.
I disagree. I think they're always situational no matter what. But I could make the same comment about the different clans, is that what they're called, in Rising Sun, the Dragonfly clan, the Lotus clan, those things. I mean, they're all different from one another. If they weren't different, then why would there be asymmetry?
I think it's a little more on-the-nose kind of power in Rising Sun, but maybe you're right in that all of them are a bit situational.
I am right, of course. My next pro is that this game is very streamlined. Compared with the other games in the trilogy, Ankh is super player-friendly. All units naturally have 1 combat strength, so you don't have to do complex math problems before running into battle. Also, decision bottlenecking points in previous games, like drafting monsters, are gone in this one, as the players only ever have 1 choice of monster per tier.
You know what, Mitchell? I appreciate you focusing on the benefits of this game and its simplicity. I mean, you're right. It is a simpler and more streamlined game. I, however, as an avid board game enthusiast, would rather some more complexity and, here's a big one, replayability in my games. Alright? I believe that Rising Sun has a good bit more of juice that goes a long distance compared to something that might get a little bit more tired as a cost of its streamlined nature.
Okay, first of all, being streamlined is not the same as being easy. However, I do agree that the mechanics of Ankh are easier to comprehend the mechanics of Rising Sun, and that can sometimes be a good thing and sometimes be a bad thing. For those of you who don't know me, John is being incredibly facetious right now because we always fight about how I like to play more complicated games, and he's like, yeah, whatever, this makes no sense kind of thing. However, even though Ankh, I think, has simpler mechanics, I think that the tactical skills required and the strategy are much, much more in-depth. Not to say that Rising Sun doesn't have that, but I guess this is just a time whenever we may agree to disagree. That brings me to my last pro, and that is the inclusion of the events in this game. After each action is completed a certain number of times based on player count, an event is triggered that somehow benefits the person who caused it. The most common one is to claim a monument. Having control over these structures can grant Veeps or powers, but events can also eliminate players from the game if they're not high enough on the Veep track. In fact, one cool thematic mechanic is that if no players are high enough at that point, Egypt becomes atheistic. Although the scenario booklet allows for different setups to foster replayability, one of the in-game events also allows players to place camel tokens to create new regions of their choosing. So the map ends up different every game regardless of setup.
I actually like the events. They're a unique mechanic, but we have some unique mechanics of our own.
Alright, time to put your money where your mouth is. You've been alluding to things that you will say. It's time to say them. Enough about Ankh. Tell us about Rising Sun.
Rising Sun features an epic feudal clash between old clans. It features Japanese monsters and kami from Shinto religion and folklore, and it's a blast to play. Released in 2019 by CMON, of course designed by Eric M. Lang. It's 3 to 5 players and is a wonderful game to play while listening to classical Japanese music.
What's your first pro?
My first pro is also the components. This game is beautiful in terms of everything from the minis to the board and even your little game screens. This game oozes a classical Japanese aesthetic that is light, colorful, and reminiscent of a natural beauty. The consistent artwork is styled like a delicate painting, just like the ones on the walls of hibachi restaurants.
I do think the minis are really cool in Rising Sun, and before I had played Ankh, I really did think they were the best minis out there. However, I think the ones in Ankh are better for a couple different reasons. So first of all, the ones in Ankh are bigger. Also, the ones in Ankh are easier to tell apart from each other. Pretty much you've got monsters, gods, and like regular warriors. In Rising Sun, you have like Shinto and Bushi and like Daimyo and stuff like that. I get confused between all those different ones. It's like Japanese words that I don't know. In Ankh, the only word you need to know that's not a regular word is Ankh. Everything else is in English, like followers and stuff. Plus, I just really kind of like the Egyptian aesthetic more so than the Japanese one.
Well, I'm on the other side of the preference. I love the Japanese aesthetic, and I should mention that complexity makes the game board look a bit more, well, it adds variety to it. Which leads me to my next point, which is variety. This game has a lot of small things that are mixed up every game to keep it fresh. Not only do you have your asymmetric factions with powerful abilities and a large variety of cards and monsters to use, but you also have a simple draft system, and this determines which actions you can take. Every game and every turn is fresh and exciting.
Now, you know I love replayability, but I feel like this game has a few too many choices. We touched on this a little bit before when we were talking about how Ankh is streamlined. But just as one example, the monsters, right? And the cards that you can buy. There are so many that you can buy, and this is such a table hog that it's like across the table. The last time I played this game, it was you, me, and Connor. Connor destroyed us because he was really buying up those cards. And it's not that I didn't see the value in buying those cards, is that I couldn't see them. And so I would have to get up and go and like look at all of them across the big old table. And it would just take so long that I prefer, nice quick turns. And so it just slows down the game for me. It bottlenecks, in my opinion.
I do have to confess that I'm a man of convenience, and it does bother me of exactly where we put these things. However, they're so awesome I would still rather them be there.
Yeah, whatever. Next pro.
My next pro is alliances. Honor is a big theme in Rising Sun. Just like in feudal Japan, you can make and break alliances. At the beginning of each game round, there's a tea ceremony where pairs of players can choose to ally, resulting in mutual benefits and a change in how conflict works between them. This is a delicate balance, and you don't want to help your opponents too much, but you also don't want to miss out on the bonuses your opponents are getting for their cooperation. However, one of the actions you may take in the draft is the betray action, breaking your alliance in order to replace units on the board with your own. This creates a wonderful political element that adds even more to the replayability of the game.
Bullying is not okay. This mechanic encourages bullying. No one will ally with me because they're scared of me. I rest my case.
They might not want to ally with you for other reasons, Mitchell, but nonetheless,
Okay, what's the reason, John? Why wouldn't you ally with me in our last game of this?
Well, okay, for one thing, I'm going to be honest, Mitchell. It's because you win most of the time.
What did I say? They're afraid of me.
Okay, but it's also because you can be abrasive sometimes. But it's mostly the winning.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm never abrasive. Just tell me your next pro right now.
It's battles.
Whenever there is a conflict, players bid on a set of actions that they can take during the squabble, but only if they're the highest bidder. This means that every battle involves bluffing and the attempt to deduce your opponent's next move. This keeps combat from getting stale because it's more than just defeating your opponent. You can use actions like seppuku, which destroys your own forces in exchange for honor and victory points. These mechanics keep the wars unpredictable and intriguing,
Keeping the theme of the game flowing in what is normally the most crunchy part of most games.
So I'm not a huge fan of bidding mechanics. I do appreciate that Rising Sun does battles a little bit differently than a lot of other games do, but it causes a little bit of analysis paralysis, which adds on to what I was saying about those choke points. So you have these coins that you have to basically budget for all the battles that you're planning on using. And it's like, how many do I bid? Which action do I bid on? Do I save it for later ones? And it makes it that much more difficult, which, again, I don't mind complexity in games, but I feel like this game is complex enough, and it just adds a little bit too much more. Got any wise quacks for that?
I like money.
Oh, God. All right, enough negativity. Here's the thing. We really respect Eric Lang as a game designer, not just in these games, but in his other games we've played as well. We both like both of these games, so we're having some fun in each other's behalf. But at the end of the day, we really like these games, and so we're going to talk about what we like about the other games to kind of wrap this all up. For Rising Sun, there are a couple things that are really unique. I like that not every region has a battle every time. That helps speed up the game and keep it moving. In Ankh, every region battles every time, unless someone's there by themselves. Another thing, the way that the actions work with the drafting, in most situations, there's a couple actions that this is not true about, but in most situations, one person triggers an action and they may get the better part of it, but everybody gets to do something off of that play. And so it's not like you're sitting around waiting for your turn to come around, because you're getting to do things off turn, which is really nice for keeping people engaged the whole time. Now, what about Ankh, John? Talk about some good things.
Well, I got a couple of good things. First of all, similar to Rising Sun. Secondly, it is a really cool thing that Eric Lang is so attentive to how board game fans actually are. He knows that in a competitive board game with like 3 or more people, at the end there's going to be one guy really ahead and everybody else is teaming up to go against that guy, and he made it into a mechanic. I love the merging. I was kind of upset with it at first, but then when I learned about our merged name and me and Connor teaming up against Mitchell, who was winning, I thought it was a hilarious and fun thing to do, and I really think Ankh in general is a great game.
To be clear, naming your merged guide by making a portmanteau of the two guys' names is nowhere in the rulebook. That's just something John came up with. It. What was it, Amun Anubis?
Amun Anubis.
Yeah.
It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, sure. All right, well, hey, it's now in your hands. Please continue the discussion in the comments and vote in the official ballot. I just want to clarify, your vote only counts if you vote in the ballot. YouTube comments are great. We'll read them next week. But vote in the ballot as well, please, so that we can actually count your vote. Yeah, it's in your hands. We'll see if John can take the golden meeple from me. I have it from last time. And yeah, with that, I'll go ahead and say I'm Mitchell.
And I'm John.
You forgot your name for a second there?
A little bit.
And this is
Board Game Battles.